People think betrayal is loud. They expect slamming doors, shattered plates, and shouting matches in the driveway. It isn't. Betrayal is remarkably quiet. It happens on a random Tuesday evening standing next to a humming refrigerator while folding a dish towel. My name is Sylvia Newman. I am 66 years old, a widow of 4 years, and until last month I was the silent financial engine keeping my daughter's life running. Sarah is 34, married to a man named David, who treats money like a renewable resource he doesn't have to work for. For 3 years, ever since my husband passed, I had been transferring $2,500 on the first of every month into Sarah's account. It started as a temporary fix, a gap in their mortgage, a bad month for David's sales job. Then it simply became a subscription they never canceled. That Tuesday evening, I asked Sarah for a pause. A heavy storm had torn several shingles off my roof, causing a leak in the guest bedroom. The repair estimate was exactly $5,000. I had savings, of course, but dipping into them made me uneasy. I placed my coffee cup on the counter and asked if we could suspend the monthly transfer for just 2 months so I could cover the roof from my regular income. Sarah didn't even look up from her phone. She was casually swiping through photos of a kitchen remodel she wanted. "Mom, we budget around that money." She sighed, sounding like she was explaining basic math to a toddler. "It's just for 2 months, Sarah. The roof is leaking." She finally looked up, her expression entirely devoid of warmth. "You're your own problem, Mom. Your money is yours, and my money is mine. You need to figure out your own house maintenance." I stood there feeling the damp fabric of the dish towel in my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't remind her of the 3 years of transfers. I just looked at her, absorbed the absolute clarity of her words, and smiled. "You're absolutely right," I replied softly. She went back to her phone, assuming she had won an argument. She didn't realize she had just rewritten the rules of our relationship. The next morning, the house was completely silent. I brewed a pot of dark roast, sat at the small wooden dining table my late husband built, and opened my laptop. I am not a vengeful person, but I am an organized one. I logged into my bank account and went straight to the recurring transfers page. There it was, Sarah and David, household support, $2,500. I clicked the small red X next to it. A confirmation box popped up asking if I was sure. I didn't hesitate. Delete. With a few keystrokes, 36 months of habit ended. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. Then I decided to look a little closer at the past 3 years. I pulled up my credit card statements, the one I gave Sarah for emergencies only. I scrolled through the charges. There were no hospital visits or emergency car tows. Instead, I saw a $400 charge at a boutique winery, a $250 bill for a high-end dog groomer, $600 for weekend cabin rentals. They weren't using my money to survive. They were using it to upgrade. I picked up my phone and locked the card. I didn't cancel it; that would trigger an immediate notification. I simply paused all future transactions. I sat back and watched the sunrise through the kitchen window. For years, I had convinced myself that keeping my daughter comfortable was my duty as a mother. I had rationalized David's laziness as temporary, but seeing the numbers stacked up on a screen burned away the fog. I wasn't their safety net. I was their slush fund. I finished my coffee, closed the laptop, and went outside to inspect my roof. I called the contractor and paid the $5,000 deposit from my checking account without a second thought. The money would be replenished in 2 months anyway. Now, all I had to do was wait for the first of the month. I wondered how long it would take for them to notice the well had run dry. 2 weeks passed. The silence from Sarah was entirely normal. She only ever called when she needed something, a pattern I was finally allowing myself to see. Every other Sunday, Sarah, David, and my 2 grandchildren came to my house for dinner. Traditionally, I spent the entire weekend grocery shopping, marinating, and baking. I would serve a massive roast, clean up their mess, and pack leftovers for David's lunches. This Sunday, I decided to honor Sarah's new rule. My money is mine. At 5:00 p.m., their SUV pulled into my driveway. The kids ran through the front door, leaving muddy footprints on the rug. David walked in empty-handed, heading straight for my recliner and turning on the television. Sarah trailed behind, dropping her designer purse on the entryway table. "Smells weird in here," Sarah noted, sniffing the air. "You didn't burn the roast, did you?" "I didn't make a roast," I answered, sitting on the sofa with a book. Sarah stopped in her tracks. "What do you mean? What are we eating?" "I had a sandwich at noon," I smiled politely. "I'm not very hungry tonight, but feel free to order yourselves something. The takeout menus are in the top drawer." David peered around the corner of the living room, looking genuinely confused. "Wait, there's no dinner." "Sylvia, I skipped lunch for this. Then you must be starving, David. You should probably order a large." Sarah stared at me, her eyes narrowing. She opened the fridge, expecting to find the usual stockpiles of organic fruit and expensive cheeses I bought for the kids. It contained my yogurt, half a loaf of bread, and some leftover salad. "Mom, what is going on?" "There's no food in this house. I only bought what I needed for the week," I replied calmly, turning a page of my book. Grumbling, David pulled out his phone and ordered 3 pizzas. When the delivery driver arrived 40 minutes later, David instinctively looked at me to hand over the cash. I didn't look up from my reading. He had to dig into his own wallet, his jaw tight. They ate in a tense silence. The kids were happy with pizza, but Sarah kept shooting me sideways glances. She knew something was different, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The real test was only 4 days away. The first of the month landed on a Thursday. I went about my day exactly as usual. I pruned my hydrangeas, went to a water aerobics class, and read the afternoon paper. At 2:15 p.m., my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from Sarah. "Hey, Mom, did you get a fraud alert or something? The transfer didn't go through this morning." I wiped my hands on a towel and picked up the phone. I didn't type out a long explanation. I didn't remind her of the roof or her attitude or the winery charges. I just typed one sentence: "No fraud alert." "The transfers are permanently canceled." 3 gray dots appeared immediately. They danced on the screen, vanished, and appeared again. Then my phone started ringing. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. I silenced the ringer, slipped the phone into my pocket, and went back to my hydrangeas. An hour later, another text came through. "Mom, this isn't funny. The HOA fee and the kids' gymnastics tuition autopay tomorrow. I need you to fix whatever glitch happened with the bank right now." I pulled out my phone and replied, "No glitch, Sarah. As you said, my money is mine and yours is yours. You'll have to figure out your own household maintenance. Have a good afternoon." I turned the phone entirely off. For 3 years, I had managed their financial anxiety for them. I had absorbed their stress so they could live comfortably above their means. Handing that stress back to them felt surprisingly heavy at first, but by the time I finished watering the garden, my shoulders felt lighter than they had in years. I knew they wouldn't let it go easily. People who are used to standing on your shoulders usually get angry when you step aside. I went inside and made sure the front door was deadbolted. I had a feeling David wouldn't just send a text. At 6:30 p.m., tires screeched in my driveway. I was washing a teacup in the sink, watching through the window as David slammed his car door. Sarah was right behind him, looking pale and frantic. I didn't open the door. I waited for them to use their spare key. The lock clicked, and David had pushed the door open, his face flushed. "Sylvia, what the hell is this?" he demanded, holding up his phone. I dried my hands slowly. Hello, David. Please don't yell in my house. You're cutting us off, just like that. Sarah stepped out from behind him, her voice trembling. Do you know how embarrassing it was to get a decline notification from the gymnastics academy? I assume it's about as embarrassing as having a leaking roof and no way to fix it, I offered gently. This is ridiculous, David interrupted, stepping closer. He used his height to try and intimidate me, a trick he often used on customer service workers. We depend on that money. You can't just pull the rug out from under us without warning. It's my money, David. I don't require a notice period to stop giving it away. I walked over to the entryway table where David had tossed his keys. Attached to his keyring was the brass spare key to my house. Mom, please. We don't have $2,500 just sitting around. We're going to overdraft, Sarah pleaded, dropping the anger for a moment to show genuine panic. Then you need to look at your budget, I replied. I reached out, unclipped my spare key from David's ring, and slipped it into my pocket. David noticed immediately. What are you doing reclaiming my property? I stated. If you need me, you can knock. But right now, I'd like you both to leave. They stood there in stunned silence. I wasn't arguing, crying, or defending myself. I was simply a wall they couldn't push over. Without my money backing him, David suddenly looked very small. He grabbed his remaining keys, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out. Sarah looked at me one last time, hoping I would cave. I gave her the exact same flat look she had given me over the roof. She turned and followed her husband. The next morning, I learned exactly why they were panicking so badly. My younger son, Leo, lives 2 states away. He is quiet, independent, and makes a modest living as an electrician. He never asked me for a dime after his 18th birthday. On Saturday morning, he called to check in. Mom, Sarah, called me last night. Crying hysterically, Leo began skipping the small talk. She said you cut them off and they're going to lose the house. They aren't going to lose the house, Leo. I just stopped giving them extra spending money. Leo sighed heavily on the other end of the line. Mom, do you know where that money was actually going? I paused, wiping down the counter. They said it was for the mortgage gap and the kids' school. Half of it, maybe. Leo said, his voice tightening. David's parents bought that RV last year, right? And they take all those cruises. Sarah told me a few months ago, after a few glasses of wine, that David has been sending his parents $1,000 a month to help fund their retirement lifestyle. Because his parents didn't save anything, I stopped wiping the counter. The cloth went still under my hand. For 3 years, I had been sacrificing my own security to indirectly finance the vacations of David's parents. The sheer audacity of it didn't make me angry. It made me deeply, profoundly tired. Thank you for telling me, Leo, I said quietly. Are you okay, Mom? I'm better than okay. I'm finally awake. After hanging up, I drove down to the local hardware store. I bought 3 new heavy-duty locks for the front, back, and garage doors. When I got home, I changed them myself. It took me 2 hours and a bit of elbow grease, but the physical act of removing the old cylinders felt like pulling weeds by the roots. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't send a dramatic family email. I simply secured my perimeter. I knew Sarah's playbook. When pressure mounted, she used the grandchildren as leverage or tried to force her responsibilities onto me. I was certain she would try one last desperate move. I just didn't know it would happen the very next weekend. Sarah and David had a long-standing tradition of taking a weekend trip to a coastal bed and breakfast every autumn. They usually assumed I would watch the kids from Friday evening to Sunday afternoon. They never formally asked. They just announced drop-off times. Friday morning, Sarah sent a text, dropping the kids at 5 p.m. Be there. It wasn't a request. It was an order from a woman trying to re-establish control. She assumed I would never turn away my grandchildren. She was right about my love for the kids, but entirely wrong about my willingness to be a pawn. I packed a small overnight bag. I loaded my golden retriever Buster into the back seat of my sedan, locked the newly installed deadbolts, and drove 90 miles north to a quiet motel near the mountains. At 5:15 p.m., my phone started buzzing. I was sitting on a motel balcony watching the sunset with a cup of tea. I let it ring. At 5:30 p.m., Sarah texted, "Where are you? Your car is gone and my key doesn't work." I took a sip of tea and typed back, "I went out of town for the weekend. Have a nice time on your trip." The response was immediate and furious. "Are you kidding me? We have non-refundable reservations. We can't take the kids to an adults-only B&B. Come back right now." I didn't reply. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb and tossed Buster a treat. By forcing the kids on me, Sarah thought she could reset the dynamic, cornering me into my old role of the compliant, serving mother. Finding an empty house and changed locks broke the illusion completely. She couldn't yell at a locked door. She couldn't guilt-trip an empty driveway. I spent the weekend hiking with Buster and reading. I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. When I returned home on Sunday afternoon, there were deep tire tracks in the grass near my driveway, a clear sign of David's angry reversal. Day 30 was approaching. The real financial impact was about to hit them, and the foundation they built on my money was cracking fast. 30 days exactly after I canceled the transfer, the reality of their lifestyle caught up to them. The $2,500 hole wasn't just a missing luxury fund. It was the load-bearing beam of their entire monthly budget. Because they had been funneling money to David's parents and maxing out their own credit, they had absolutely zero savings. On a Tuesday afternoon, my doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. It was just Sarah. No David. She looked exhausted. Her hair pulled back into a messy knot, wearing sweatpants instead of her usual boutique outfits. I unlocked the door and stepped out onto the porch, pulling it shut behind me. I didn't invite her in. "Mom, please," she said, her voice cracking. "David's car got repossessed this morning." I looked at her, noting the dark circles under her eyes. "I'm sorry to hear that, Sarah. We're drowning," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "David asked his parents for help, but they said their money is tied up in the RV. We can't make the mortgage next week. You have to turn the transfers back on, just for a little while. I'm begging you." She wasn't demanding anymore. The entitlement had been crushed under the weight of actual responsibility. But I remembered the way she had looked at her phone when I asked for help with my roof. I remembered where my money had actually been going. "Sarah," I began, my voice steady and low. "For 3 years, I funded your life while you funded David's parents' vacations. You lived in a fantasy built on my bank account. I love you, but I will not finance your husband's pride or your poor choices anymore." She looked up, stunned that I knew about David's parents. "Leo told you," she whispered. "It doesn't matter who told me. What matters is that the arrangement is over. So you're just going to let us fail, let your grandchildren lose their house. If you lose your house, it's because you and David failed to pay for it." I corrected her firmly. "You are adults. You will figure it out." I reached for the doorknob. She grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "If you don't help us," Sarah threatened, her sadness instantly flashing back to anger. "We're moving in here. Half this house belongs to me anyway. It's my inheritance." I looked down at her hand on my arm until she slowly let go. "You have a fundamental misunderstanding of ownership, Sarah," I stated calmly. "For the last 3 weeks, while they were panicking over car payments, I had been quietly busy. My large 4-bedroom house was entirely paid off, but it was too big for me and Buster. And it was filled with things Sarah and David had stored here over the years. Old furniture boxes of clothes, holiday decorations they didn't have room for. They treated my home like a free storage facility. "Wait here," I instructed. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and grabbed the dolly I had rented from the hardware store. Stacked on it were 6 heavy plastic bins. I wheeled them out onto the porch and pushed them toward her. "What is this?" she asked, stepping back. "Everything you and David left in my attic and garage," I replied. "I've spent the last week packing it. You'll need to take it with you today." "Why?" she stammered, looking at the towering stack of boxes. "Because the house is going on the market next week," I said. Sarah's mouth dropped open. "You're selling the house. You can't do that. Where are we supposed to go if we lose ours?" "You will rent an apartment you can afford," I answered smoothly. "I am downsizing to a small townhouse closer to Leo. I've already signed the purchase agreement." She stared at me as if looking at a stranger. The realization washed over her face in real time. There was no safety net to fall back on. No free storage. No massive house to retreat to when her own poor planning caught up with her. I had surgically removed myself from their ecosystem. "Load your boxes, Sarah," I said softly. "I have to get back to my packing." I walked inside and locked the door behind me, leaving her alone on the porch with her belongings. It has been 6 months since I handed Sarah those boxes. I live in a beautiful single-level townhouse with a small fenced yard for Buster. It costs half of what my old house did to maintain, and there is no guest room for anyone to overstay their welcome. The roof doesn't leak. Sarah and David didn't lose their house, but it was a near thing. David had to swallow his pride and take a second job working nights at a warehouse to catch up on the mortgage. Sarah started working full-time at a real estate office. From what Leo tells me, they sold all their expensive toys and haven't spoken to David's parents since they refused to help. Sarah called me on Thanksgiving. She sounded tired, but grounded. She didn't ask for money. She just asked if I was doing okay. "I'm doing very well, Sarah. How are the kids?" I asked. "They're good," she hesitated. We're figuring it out. David's working a lot." "Hard work builds character," I replied mildly. We didn't have a tearful reunion. I didn't invite them over for a massive holiday meal. We kept the conversation to 15 minutes, polite and distant. That is the boundary now. Sometimes people need to hit the concrete to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet. I spent years being the mattress at the bottom of their cliff, absorbing the impact while they kept jumping. Removing myself was the most difficult and most necessary thing I have ever done as a mother. I walked into my new bright kitchen, filled the kettle, and looked out at my small garden. My bank account is secure. My home is my own. And for the first time in years, when the phone rings, I don't feel a pit in my stomach. I took a sip of my tea, petted Buster's head, and enjoyed the quiet. My money is mine, and my peace is entirely my own.